Good morning and God bless you on this Monday morning. I want to share with you some adventures we had this weekend. My dad moved up here from California and we were able to put some of the furniture that he gave to us in the house and get it in place. And I want to show you about one very special piece that we received and a little bit about some discouragement related to it. Furniture up. And I wanted to share with you, this is a piano that's been in our family for a long time that my dad has given to me and Brenda. And I need to say mostly to Brenda because I don't really play the piano. I should not play the piano. It's a bad thing when I play the piano. But even though I don't play it myself, this is part of my family history and I love this piano. And a few years. And so after the movers got it in and we got it in place, we wiped everything down and I started checking things out because something looked a little crooked. And I came over and I went and opened the cover on the keys, and this is what I discovered. You can see the keys are offset and raised out of their places. Well, however many adages you want to say, you can't judge a book by its cover, or just because the outside looks good doesn't mean the inside is good. This piano is our most recent example of those truths. And though outwardly it absolutely looked beautiful, just the way I've always remembered it, I can't tell you how devastating it was to lift up the lid on those keys and to look in and see that it is clearly severely broken. And we're going to be looking at getting a piano repair person to evaluate it and hopefully be able to fix it. But a huge disappointment. But of course, when things like this happen, I always kind of think, God, what are you trying to teach me through this? And I started thinking of how many times our lives are exactly like this piano. We work so hard to keep the outside looking good so that what we project to the world around us is an image of I'm in control, I'm a good person, I've got it all together, good citizen, responsible. And yet if you look beneath the surface, you find that there is a lot of brokenness. Today I'd like to focus on when the brokenness is our own fault, when it's the mess that has made of our hearts and our souls when we are the ones who have sinned. And I wanted you to think about a couple passages from Jesus. Jesus in Matthew chapter 23, he has some warnings for people who live their lives outwardly looking like they're right. He says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and self-indulgence. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but inside they are full of bones and dead and everything unclean." Pretty stark words, Jesus warning that the outside doesn't always indicate what's on the inside, and that there are those who hide a lot of sin behind the pretext of righteousness. I think for a moment of how we live our lives in this way. It's especially dangerous for those who go to church because we are in an environment where we're talking to people about living faithfully for God, about turning away from sin. And there's kind of a pressure when we're in that community that if that's what our values are and if we're encouraging everybody to do that, then it's really kind of becomes more and more embarrassing or shameful to admit that we're not always living up to those and that we're not always walking in those ways. And I want to remind you, sin has consequences. Jesus said it this way. He said, anyone who sins is a slave to sin. And that's a warning that we need to understand, because whether we think it's a big sin or a small sin, sin is addictive. And sin tends to be progressive. The things that satisfy our desires on one level probably won't stay that long. And especially when they're hidden in secrecy and we pretend like they're not there, they have the danger of totally poisoning our entire soul as we try to keep secret the sins and the things that we're struggling with. Now I want to share with you a warning from Peter. In 1 Peter chapter 5, he simply says this. He said, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Pretty serious warning there, that what the devil wants to do is to destroy us. And often he does it by those little sins that we don't necessarily acknowledge and don't necessarily repent for, and how those can escalate and grow into something much, much bigger. So that even though on the outside we may look good to others, inside we know that there's a disconnect between us and God. I think of a story from the Gospels. It's a very familiar story from the Gospel of John chapter 8. It's referred to often as the woman caught in the act of adultery. I think there could be lots of names for this story. One of them could be what happened to the guy, because it says that she was caught in the act of adultery. Jesus is in Jerusalem at the temple, and the Pharisees and Jesus' opponents come to Jesus, and they're trying to trick him, to trap him. And they bring a woman, and it says in the text, she was caught in the act of committing adultery, which is what makes me say, where's the guy? But she says, teacher, according to our law, this woman deserves to be stoned, to be killed by throwing stones at her until she is dead. Now, what do you say? It's beautiful. It says in the text that Jesus kneels down and begins drawing on the ground or writing on the ground. We don't know what he was drawing or writing, but eventually he says, let the one who has no sin cast the first stone. And it says, beginning with the older ones first, one by one, they dropped their stones and walked away until there was no one left except Jesus and the woman. Jesus asks, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. I think of this story because we don't know if this woman was trying to put on one front in public and then having an affair in private. All we know is that she was caught in the act. And that's the warning to us. Jesus said, nothing that is done in secret will not be revealed. There's a certain sense where one day or another we're going to have to deal with what's inside. And to deal with that honestly, to take it to the Lord and say, Lord, I am sorry I have sinned. And to find the people in our lives that we trust, that we can confess to and confide in. These are the first steps toward experiencing the freedom that Jesus' grace can give and the freedom that the truth can bring into our lives. So I encourage you and challenge you a little bit. Are you like our piano? How much effort goes into the outside and externally looking good and looking like it's all together, and what's going on the inside? And if you find there's some things you need to talk about, that you need to confess, well, good grief, please feel free. You can call me, you can set an appointment, we can talk on the phone or exchange emails. But really, it's the beauty of being the church. Any baptized believer in Jesus has the same authority to speak his word of grace, because we all come into the Lord's power the same way, as sinners who have been cleansed and washed and forgiven because of his love and sacrifice. So God bless you, and I'll look forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye.